In this class, we're going to talk about how to determine your values and your motivation, because so much of what enables you to have a fulfilling career is making sure that the work you're doing is aligned with your personal values and the things that motivate you. So let me talk you through the agenda for this class. In this class, we're going to talk about our approach and some of the things that we think about and the frameworks that Teal uses to think about this category. And then we're going to talk about values, specifically how to determine your values and a framework for thinking about values. Then your motivations, what are those things that drive you? And then a vision, working on using your values and your motivations to define a vision of where you want to go. And then with that, we'll wrap up. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the first section. In this section, we're going to talk about Teal's approach to thinking about your values and motivation. It all is about that moment in time where you take a pause, take a beat, and think about your career. And this might be for something as big as a career pivot and a full-on transition to a new occupation, a new industry, or it might be where you take a beat and think about your next position and a promotion. And so pausing and thinking about career exploration is a really important part in the career life cycle of exploring, searching, and developing. So the way we think about it is you revisit your style and your values and you think about what matters to you. Then you get clear on your skills and interests and you make sure that those things are aligned. Then you do that exploratory phase of thinking about what's possible. Then you analyze those abilities, plan, and go get it. All right, so that's how we think about this phase of exploration. Again, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 5 months, but that pause that you take to think about what you want to do. That ladders up to our framework for fulfilling work, which really sits at the intersection of your style, your values, your interests, and your skills. And if you can really sit at the middle of those, then you could really be doing work that fills you up, energizes you, and gets you to that path of doing fulfilling work. And for the values, we really break it up into these 3 components that sit at the intersection of that Venn diagram. It's your values, identifying those things that matter to you, that are intrinsic to you. Then the motivations, the why. What are you pushing towards? What's that purpose? And then the vision, the direction. Where are you going? Right? And you're going to revisit this all the time. A lot of the career work is, putting these things down and making it feel like it's forever. We really think it's about an agile process and treating yourself like an agile development process. And these things are going to change. What matters to you when you're just getting out of school to when you're in the middle of your career towards when you're the end of your career. These things are going to change. And what we want to do is give you a framework for thinking about these things so that you can revisit them on an interval that's valuable to you. We're going to be using this values workbook, and I'm not going to jump into it right now, but you may want to pull it up in the platform, go over to the tools section and look for the values workbook, because in each section, we will be revisiting it and adding to it. We'll explore it in detail in the first section of the class. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and jump into the values. In this section, we're going to talk about values, how you identify your values, some of the ways to think about them, how you categorize them, and then how you document them and continue to iterate. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. First, let's define what a value is. A value are the key drivers that motivate you and define what is most important to you in work and life, right? These are important to us. Now, it's also important to state that they can change. Speaking about myself, the values I had when I was in my early 20s, just thinking about my career, are very different than the values I have today with 2 kids and thinking about my family. And that is absolutely okay. There are some that are truly intrinsic and core to who I am. And as I revisit those over time, those don't change that much. But then there are others that might. And that's okay. And what we really want you to do is to get into the pattern and rhythm of revisiting your values so you can always be moving your career closer and closer to what those values are in the moment. And why values matter is because they really affect your fulfillment. If you are doing work that does not align with your values at the time, it will drain you and the work will not be fulfilling. But then the opposite is true. If the work and the company you're at align with your personal and professional values, then that's going to charge you up. That's going to be the kind of work that you jump out of bed for and you want to do. So the greater that distance between your values and the company values, the more energy you're going to have to spend to try to make that work exciting. The closer they are, the more it'll come natural. So it's really important that you try to align your values with the company values and the values of the role and what's expected of you and the work that you're doing on a day in and day out basis. And values help you create boundaries and a benchmark for your career decisions. Because what happens is, if we're trying to consider everything every time we make a career decision, that becomes incredibly overwhelming. And every decision has a tremendous amount of magnitude. But if you can document your values, then you can pass every career decision through those values. If you get clear on your values for income, well, then you can start to have some ideas around, is that what you're prioritizing at the moment? Or are you thinking about long-term income or work-life balance? Or maybe now's the time where that's low on your values priorities. And you can actually do a little bit more work or sacrifice a little balance. But again, these things can change. And over the course of your life and your career, they're going to change. But if you've got them documented, it doesn't make it as heavy every time you have to think about one of these decisions and as if you were starting from scratch. So that's why we really recommend that you go through this process of documenting and understanding your values before you embark on major career decisions. So let's talk about how those values you start to sort of come together and how you think about them. A framework we really like to help discern your values, right? Because the values are kind of deep in there and we all know them, but sometimes we don't document them explicitly. So a valuable exercise is to think about, what are things you're running away from, which honestly is sometimes a little easier, and what are the things you're running towards? And that's where we want to get, because when we're running away from something, it's really about a reaction to a negative. It's something we don't want to do anymore. And where we go might not get us to what we want to be doing. We might still find ourselves doing what we don't want to do, so it's just another thing we want to run away from versus having a destination. So when you go through this exercise of thinking about what are things you want to do less of, it might be more productive, but ultimately we want to figure out what we're running towards. So if we think about things we want to do less of or running away from, it's, I don't want to work nights and weekends. I don't want my paycheck to be a surprise. Maybe you're on variable compensation. You want to know what it is in a steady way. I don't want to work in a corporate office. I want to work in a more startup-y, exciting environment. Those are things that you don't want. And then they may help you understand, if you spend time thinking about them, what you do want to do, which is what you want to run towards, which is really our goal. So then you start to document what you want to do more of, right? I want to be able to work from home. I want to be able to be on cross-functional teams. I want to work on something with impact, right? These are now telling you things that you want to do. These are some intentionalities about a future that you're excited about. And so we would say those are things you're running towards and want to do more of. Once you have them all kind of documented, your run away froms and your run towards, you could start to figure out patterns of things that are coming up on both of those. So you might say these have to do with work-life balance. These are about having a purpose and a meaning in my work. These are about my identity and how I am perceived in the world and how I derive value. And what you want to start to do is identify these themes. And we're going to give you 6 themes that you can work in, but you can also add your own, right? This is to really help the process. We've done a lot of thinking on ways to cluster these and see these as these 6 core values for your career. But again, think about things that matter to you. If we missed one, go ahead and add it. If there's one that's really important to you and it needs to be broken up into 2, that's okay also. What you want is a framework for you to think about your values in a structured way. And these are the 6 that we have. The environment. And we don't mean the environment in terms of the office, but think about the culture that you're a part of, the surrounding and the context that you're in. And it's one that you feel like you can flourish in. Then relationships. Relationships are absolutely critical to a healthy career because that is career capital. Those relationships are things you're going to be able to leverage in the future. You're going to get introductions. They're going to help you grow. So you're going to think about the relationships and your need and your value for relationships. Then identity, right? Your status, recognition, expertise. Some of us have a higher importance for that than others, and that's absolutely okay. And what's important is that we recognize it and that we own it so that we can pursue it with purpose. Then income. right? We're not in a world where we can't make money. And so some of us may have higher or lesser concerns for money at different moments in our life. So you want to prioritize that. Is it at the top of the list or the bottom of the list? Then balance, right? Balance is really about control. And it's not about a 50-50. It's about you feeling like you have control of your time and that you can balance it in a way that is relative to you. If you want to be working all the time and that feels good, that's great. If you want to be able to do whatever you want when you want, you're going to want to think about what is that balance for you, because balance is relative. So it's about giving you that time and that control and your ability to focus on the things that you want to be focusing on. And then purpose. What's the reason for your work? Does the work that you do have to align with something bigger than yourself, with your impact, with experiences? And if that's important, you're going to want to be clear on that, because you're going to want to look for opportunities that allow you to grow that. All right, so these are the 6 categories of values. Again, you can add your own. We generally think they fall into these 6 buckets, but go ahead and feel free to add your own and start to do the exercise. So let's walk through how the worksheet operates. We've got this Teal Values workbook, and what it's meant to do is to help you discern and document these values so you don't have to keep them all up here. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So this workbook is in a Google Sheet. You're just going to go over here to Copy Tool and make a version of your own. And then from there, you can download it to Excel if that's something you're more comfortable with, or Excel numbers, any tool. It's really just a simple spreadsheet with a lot of formulas and pre-populated lists. So this is the blank one. To save us some time, I'll jump over to the values example so you can see. And what you've got here is a list of more granular values that you can start to pick from. And obviously you can add your own if there's any we missed. There's lots of great lists of values out there. And what you're going to do is go in and categorize them as, or prioritize them, let's say, as important, neutral, not important. And there's no judgment here. It's what matters to you. And again, this can change. You might want to revisit it on a monthly, quarterly, yearly basis. And what it's going to do is going to pull out those things that are not important to you right now, the things that you're kind of neutral on, and the things that are important, it's going to populate this list with. And then what we're going to ask you to do is rank your top 5, right? And so all you're going to do is pick here and do 1 through 5 and do the top 5. That'll then give you your top values. And with the other sheets in the workbook, we can build on that and do other things, which we'll talk about in a minute. But this is a way for you to start to document your values and categorize those things that are important to you. All right, so with that, that's the workbook, and we'll jump back over to the presentation. Okay, so that's our section on values. If you have any questions, we can obviously talk about it in the Career Council, or you can hit us up on Slack. But with that, we'll go ahead and jump over to the next section. In this section, we're going to talk about motivation. And what we mean by motivation is why. Why do I do this? What are these things that push me to do this work? And motivations are the forces or influences that cause us to take action or to act or do something. And so what are those internal forces and that energy that's pushing us to do things? Because when we're not motivated, then we become incredibly drained. We need to find motivation in some way. And the more that it's intrinsic and it's the things that we naturally want to do, the easier it's going to come, and then the higher likelihood we're going to be successful at it, because we're going to enjoy it, and it's going to come natural, and we're going to excel. The thing about motivation is sometimes it's not obvious to us. It's buried deep in there, and it's there for sure, because we don't just take action by accident, but it may not be as obvious. And there's this great framework that's come out of lean manufacturing and Toyota's production system, which is called the 5 whys. And it's really about getting to the reason, to the core root cause for why we want to do things. So we've taken a version of that and co-opted it a little bit to help us figure out our motivations. And what we do is we use our values to do that. So we go to a value, which we kind of know on the surface, and we put it through 3 whys instead of 5. If you want to go 5, that's great. But sometimes for these things that are a little softer and a little more ephemeral, it's hard to get deep into it. So what we want you to do is think about a value like impact, and think about why. Why do I want impact? It's because I want to do something meaningful. And why do I want to do something meaningful? Because I want to make a difference in people's lives. That matters to me. And why do I want to make a difference in people's lives? It's because I enjoy mentoring people to improve their lives. And so what's my motivation is I want to be a role model for others. Okay, now I've got a motivation, and I can use that for what as a guiding light for when I make career decisions and the roles that I'm after. And the reason we like this is because it's more about an intentionality. A lot of times what we see is people will focus on a tactic, like I need to be a VP. They achieve VP and they're still unfulfilled because they're not getting to those intentionalities, which is, this VP role is not one where I get to mentor and lead people and be a role model. It's one where I'm sort of back of house, running all the operations, and it's not fulfilling. Neither is better or worse, but what's important is to know which ones align with your values and your motivations so you can be energized and excited about the work you do. So going back to the workbook, you can then use your values to start to document your why for each one. So let's pop over to the workbook and see what that looks like. So once you're back in the workbook, there's two tabs. There's the values and the vision. And when you go over to the vision, I'll go to the example, you'll see that the values have been filled out for you, each of your top 5. And we've got these 3 whys, which are blank in the template, and you can go through that process, right? And then in the next section, we'll talk about the vision, and we'll come back to the workbook. But if you have your motivations and these whys, then it's going to really help us think about how we declare that vision for what we want to do with our career. All right, so with that, we'll wrap up this section and go over to vision. In this section, we're going to talk about your vision for your career. And again, like all things that Teal talks about, is these are things that can iterate. It's not going to be the only vision you ever write, but having this intentionality will help inform your decisions and reduce some of that pressure that some of these decisions may feel like they have, because you can iterate, and we're taking this agile approach to career building. So what is a vision? A vision is a clear and inspiring direction for your future that supports your values and motivations, right? It is that declaration around what the future could look like that supports your values and your motivations. This vision statement should be a lens by which you can pass career decisions through that are moving you towards this destination. Again, the destination can change, because if you arrive there and stay there, you're going to get bored and you're not going to be fulfilled and you're not going to be growing. So it is a moving target, and it is a thing that will evolve, but you want to continue to work on it and get that clarity around where you want to go. And so we've seen, and research has shown, that if you've got goals that are easy to visualize, they can be perceived as more attainable, versus goals that are hard to visualize, then they're not going to really feel attainable. And people will then just kind of stop pursuing them because they'll feel too out of reach. So you want to have this vision statement that feels attainable. You want it to stretch you, and you want to have a goal that pushes you, but you don't want it to feel so far that it's unattainable. And having a career vision will motivate you and will keep you engaged in your work, because you know you're inching closer and closer to this thing that you're excited about and this vision that you've crafted for what your career could be. Now, once you start to get closer and you feel like it's within arm's reach, then you can decide when you want to revisit it. That might be when it's really far away or really close. That's up to you. But having this destination that you continue to work towards will help you refine and crystallize your career decision making and what that growth can look like for you. And your vision will act as this powerful filter, because opportunities will present themselves, and it will allow you to be more strategic about your career rather than opportunistic. Now, that's not to say that one is better than the other, but so many of us find ourselves in situations because the opportunities seem so good. And then we say, well, how did I even arrive here? Because opportunity presented itself. And then we were kind of like being guided by or pushed along and didn't take a moment to pause and stop and say, wait, what do I want? How can I be deliberate about this future and this vision? So that's why having this vision for your career will really help you process career decisions to say, do they move you closer to your vision, further away, and then maybe further in a positive way so you can revisit your vision. And so think about it as this bi-directional, cyclical process. It's about these iterations. And so what you want to do is you want to imagine this ideal future, and you want to have this intentionality. 1, 5, 10 years, maybe that helps you think about what it might be, but don't let it really distract you on that it needs to be 10 years, right? Even 6 months is fine. It's about a destination and an intentionality about where you want to go. And so then you want to think about what you're doing, how you're feeling, what are you proud of, what recognition are you getting, right? What are the experiences that you're having at a day at work? Because that's going to help shape what you're excited about, what you're energized by, and what you want to be doing. And so here's a few examples of some vision statements. I will become a well-known and respected leader in the food industry to make healthier products to help people live better lives. Right? So that is speaking to some of my values, that is speaking to a domain that I'm excited about. Or I will become a leader in my organization, helping transform it into an organization that respects all stakeholders while being a great father to my children. Right? That, for me, addresses my balance priorities, that addresses my leadership priorities and a people orientation. And so your vision statement will crystallize your values, your motivations, and it will be this statement that you can continue to go back to help you make career decisions. So we'll end on the workbook, and I won't go ahead and go and open it up because you've kind of seen it. But now that you have done the values and the vision, and you've got your whys for each value, you can start to work on crafting that vision statement that is pulling from those things and that includes it and becomes that guiding light for your career. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up the class. All right, so that's the values and motivation class. And again, these are very core principles to how we think about our career decisions. And too many times we don't pause, take a beat, and think about these things. They're just implicit. And we think they're there, and sometimes they're like the sand in the gears if we're not aligned with them, and they slow us down, and they slowly build up, and then we'll make these big decisions abruptly because we're not taking a pause to think about what it is we want our career to be, what it is that we want to be doing, what are those values that we want to be experiencing and exercising on a daily basis so that our work excites us and energizes us and continues our growth. All right, so we really recommend that you do these exercises and you think about your values again, whether it's a 5-minute, accepting a promotion discussion or switching roles, or a 5-month long journey thinking about a career pivot. Stopping and taking a beat and going through this explore phase, thinking about what you want to do is really important before you make those career decisions. And the more you have these documented and you maintain it, the easier those will become. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up the class.